Hello and welcome to the photography show Spring Shoots. I'm Angela Nicholson. I'm one of the founders of Camera Jabber, which is a website for photographers with reviews, news, tips and techniques. And I'm a founder of She Clicks, which is a community for female photographers. But today I'm here hosting a clinic about people photography and specifically looking about photographing people outdoors. And I'm joined by some great photographers and really knowledgeable guys. So I'm just going to introduce them one at a time. So I've got Gavin Hoey, who is an Olympus ambassador and educator. We have Jeremy Martin from Transcontinenta, I think I've said that right, which is the Tamron distributor. Mark Baber, who is technical marketing manager at Sony. Chris Ord, who is a photographer and trainer. Alexander Crane, who is a portrait photographer who works with Got Photos. And we have Joe Swift from Interfit Lighting. Now, as I say, all of these guys, some have brand allegiances, but they're all really great and enthusiastic photographers. So it's really nice to have them here. So this is an opportunity for people to ask their questions about photographing people outside. So I think as a starting point, I'm going to ask Chris, I'll go straight to Alex. How do you go about picking the location for an outdoor shoot? Because obviously there's a few factors to consider.
There is. It's funny, I used to always focus on the light and that is so important, but now I like to try and think, because when you're outdoors, you've got much more freedom to introduce interesting subjects into your photos as well. So one of the things I like to do is I like to sort of find a place that I think has some interest. So that might be whether it's a tree, whether it's a fence, a building, or some steps, or if you're in a city, you can often find really nice reflections and things like that. I'm reading a book at the minute by Ernst Haas. It's all about sort of reflections in the city. And I think that's just such an amazing thing to include. And I just try and think about how I can introduce layers into my photos in a way that you can't always do if you're doing stuff in a studio. But once I've found my location, what I like to do is I like to sort of really look and think about the light. And it's actually very similar to the sort of idea of lighting your subject when you're outdoors as it is to lighting in a studio. So of course you can avoid things like harsh shadows if it is sunlight, or if it's cloudy, then you're going to look to see where most of the light's coming through. There's things you can do if it is really sunny. So for instance, I might try and put my subject a bit into shade, or I might use some sort of reflections to try and light them well. But once I've found that sort of main location, I'm just looking for where's the good light. And I think it's something that you sort of build up a sort of an ability to just see that light and try and find out where it's looking good. But yeah, if a light doesn't work, I'll change the location, because that's the number one thing really when you're trying to find. And
would you actually visit a site beforehand, or do you rely on, say, Street View or something?
I do. So I mean, I do a lot of stuff in schools. So when we're working at the schools, you don't have much opportunity to sort of change much when you're there. So you really have to have everything sort of locked down beforehand. So I'll go there, and there's even apps that you can find. I know that there's some, I've got an Android device, there's loads there, but I think there's even more if you've got Apple, and they can track where the sun's going to go. So although you're not going to know exactly where it's going to be, you can sort of use that to get a good idea about where are the shadows going to be, where is that sun going to be coming from. And I can sort of use that alongside with what's there to get a good idea. But if you can't do that, you'll always be able to sort of do something. So for instance, in the worst case scenario, if it's really bright sunlight and there absolutely is not any shade or anything, you can always place the subject where they've got the sun behind them. And as long as you've got something like a lens hood on your camera, you can usually sort of work with that. You might have to underexpose your image a bit to sort of recover those highlights. But yeah, there's always something you can do. So it's not necessary if you can't do it, but it's always nice. It's a bit of a sort of comfort if you can do that beforehand.
Yeah. And Chris, I could see you nodding away while Alex was speaking there. Do you use a very similar approach?
My approach is a little bit different, actually, Angela. So much like Alex said there, he looks for the good lights. Because I shoot probably 95% with artificial light, I look for textures and I look for locations. So for instance, I had a shoot last week and I used a little side street in Newcastle, and I always say to people, give me 100 yards, I'll give you 100 different locations which you can shoot. And I think for me, it's about finding that right, the right locations, working with textures, and just understanding how you can make the best of that. And like I said, I work a lot with artificial light. So it's, you know, one of the questions you asked Alex there, did you go and wreck your location before? I think it's really important to understand the environmental factors there. So, you know, it's no good going to wreck your location on a Sunday if you're shooting on a Monday, because the traffic might be worse, there might be loads more people about. It's good to try and do it at the same time of day, but I think it's just really important to understand where you can, but you know, what parameters are going to come into play to make sure you've got full control over what you're shooting.
Yeah, that's a really good point about going same time and same day, I think. Do you tend to just sort of see a place that you like and go there, or do you look to get permission?
If I'm just working in the streets, like, you know, normal, you know, Newcastle city centre, for instance, I'll tend to, as long as it's public land, I'll just head up there and start shooting. You've always got to be very conscious that, you know, I try to be a nice guy wherever I can, so I don't want to impact anyone's business in normal times anyway. So I don't like to take up space in front of people's shops and things like that. But I shoot quite quickly when I'm out and about anyway. So, you know, it'll be a case of getting a few shots, moving on to the next location, changing the lighting setups, and just trying to maximize a location with as many different types of shots as we can get.
And Gavin, am I right in thinking that you tend to have a slightly different approach because you hire locations?
Hi, Angela. Afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I'm not of the sort of Chris nature where I'll just go out and shoot. I wish I would. That would make my life so much easier. But because of the sort of photography I'm doing, my photography is also making video tutorials about my photography. So it's a little bit difficult to sort of just wander off into the streets and start shooting. I'm much happier as a photographer if I'm in control of the environment. And the easiest way to do that is to get permission. And usually that involves actually sort of booking, hiring and paying somebody for the permission to be there. But the huge advantage of that is you're not constantly looking over your shoulder and worrying about, is someone going to say, what are you doing? Have you taken any great photos? Who are you? And what is that camera? And it's much easier. You can also, we work with models a lot as well. So you can also find somewhere for your models to get changed, to have their makeup done. The speed of the shoot can be a little more slower paced, which is kind of useful for the way I work. And also you can hire places that specifically look good for the shoot that you're going for. So rather than just going to a location and thinking, what can I do here? I can know where I'm going in advance and then sort of style it accordingly.
And do you find that adds quite a lot more time? You know, you have to plan where you're going to go and get the permission. Are you adding a week, or is it just a couple of days?
Yeah, it adds a lot more time because by and large, we don't have a huge budget for our shoots. So we can't just sort of phone up a location hire company and hire something. It's all kind of personal calls and requests and would you mind if, and most of those actually are done by my wife, Sam. She organizes that side of the business to allow me to get on with the rest of the photography business. So between us, we do quite well, but we've worked with a few places many times, and that's another advantage of hiring somewhere. They know you. So they know what we need, what we're going to do, that we're not a couple of strange, weird photographers doing weird things. They know what we want. And by and large, once we've been there once or twice, we can generally get in a couple of days. But when I have a specific need, if there's a specific look I'm going for, yeah, it can take ages to find the right place.
Yeah. And what sort of ballpark figures are we talking about for renting places? I mean, obviously, if you go to a really fantastic stately home, it's likely to cost you quite a lot. But, you know, what could people expect to have to pay?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it can vary wildly between absolutely nothing. If you can do a deal with the property owner or the location owner and say, look, I've got an Instagram following, a social media following, or maybe they have, and you can supply them with some stuff. You might be able to negotiate, you know, zero cost. I mean, that's great. There is something to be said for actually paying, though. If you're paying somebody to go to a location, they're probably not going to cancel you, which is really good news. And cost, yeah, I mean, how long is a piece of string? Rather than saying how much does it cost, what we tend to find works is saying, this is our budget, and going down that road and saying, this is how much we've got to do a shoot. This is what we want to do. Can you accommodate us? And if they can't, then you've not wasted anyone's time other than an email. And if they can, terrific, you've got the price that you're looking for. So yeah, if your budget is a few £100, that's great. We've done shoots where the location has been thousands of pounds beyond my personal scope, but workshops with various companies that can afford it. Yeah, you can get some amazing locations if you can pay.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. We have a question from Katie, and she's asking, what advice would you give to someone who wants to shoot self-portraits on location? Who'd like to answer that one? Don't be shy.
I can
I'll answer that.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
Go for it,
All
Chris.
right.
I think first and foremost, one of the biggest factors in this is safety. And I think it's something I try and implore photographers to be really careful with. You know, we're carrying around thousands of pounds worth of gear most of the time. So I think first and foremost, even though you're shooting self-portraits, have someone with you where you can, just to make sure, you know, I'm no thin lad anymore to be able to run after people. So you've got to make sure you've got someone there to help you with the gear. And I think from another point of view, I think a creative point of view, just try and think out of the box and not worry too much about people walking by or people seeing you and watching what you're doing. I used to do a bit of YouTube vlogging, and I used to get really conscious when I was walking through the streets with this camera in front of my face talking, you know, what people would think, but you start to break those barriers with that. And I think once you get over that worry of self-confidence and people being curious, like Gavin said about shooting in location, about people being interested in what you're doing and concentrate on the creativity. I think it's about understanding why you do it, I guess.
Do you have anything to add to that, Chris? Sorry, you are Chris. Alex, sorry.
Hi, I was going to say, when I set up for a lot of my shoots, often I have to rely on getting the shot set up right with just myself. So one of the things I like to do, there's a lot of apps that you can actually get now that will sort of mirror the screen that you have on your camera that you can see yourself in. And I think something like that, where you can really dial in settings where you can actually really see what you're going to look like, that might be possible if you were to bring out a tripod, or you could even have a gorilla pod and sort of tie your camera down somewhere. So something like that might help you just to sort of be at both sides of the camera at once if you're thinking about taking photos of yourself and you are going to be doing it yourself.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And we have another question here. It's about the rules of GDPR and I guess privacy concerning people who may get in the background in the frame when whoever you're photographing, whether it's yourself or a model. What are the rules there? You know, what if somebody comes up to you and says, "Oh, why are you taking a photo? I'm in your picture." Is that something any of you have experienced? No, I'm getting lots of head shaking. Alex, what advice would you give to someone perhaps who, you know, somebody's wandered into a shot and then they kind of think, well, what's happening there?
So there's sort of two different, from my understanding, and I am not qualified at all to give advice on this. So please, whatever I say, just take it with a pinch of salt. But from my understanding, there's two different sort of things going on here. So you've got your photograph, which is something that you're sort of copywriting as a creator, and that is yours. But then you've also got the data, which is the person's image that you've got to consider, and it's about how you use that. So if it's your photograph and you're just keeping it and you've got a good reason to keep it, my understanding is that it's okay as long as you're not putting it somewhere like on social media, or you're putting it in a sort of place that they haven't given you permission for. So it's sort of, I think maybe a lot to do with what you're actually going to use that image for. And in that case, then of course you'll need to get permission and you'll need to speak to someone. Because of the nature of my business, there's other people that I'll work with that will deal with that sort of thing a bit more specifically, and that's so the company Got Photo, they'll deal with a lot of that stuff, so I don't have to. And I think if you can be in a position where you can offload that onto someone else, that's a really good idea in terms of if you're trying to work out what the right thing to do is. But I think as a rule of thumb, if it's going anywhere where other people can see it, then you're going to need to get some sort of permission.
I guess there are issues of recognizability as well. So if you're shooting wide open, they're in the background and just really blurred, maybe just creating a bit of atmosphere.
Yeah.
Less of a concern. And it might be if you show them the picture and they can see, oh yeah, that could be anybody. They might just walk off and not be worried, I suppose.
I saw Gavin have a reaction there, so I think maybe have I got some of that wrong with having people in there, Gavin? Is that something that you're a bit more aware of? I've got that wrong, have I? Oh.
Yeah,
a bit.
No, not really. I mean, we don't have a right to privacy if we're in a public space, unfortunately. Right. So you can't ask somebody, a photographer that was taking pictures, and you happen to walk in to say, I'm in that. As a politeness, you might want to actually show them and delete it if it's a problem. But as a general rule of thumb, as far as I understand, if you're in a public place, not a private property, then yeah, we're on CCTV every day, I guess. So I think it's a little bit of a challenging one, but it comes down to yeah, just being sensible with your cameras. don't go around where kids are playing and take photos. It's just asking for trouble. So another reason for hiring places is just so I can avoid those sorts of situations. But in the past, I've done work where we filmed on location for various companies. A nice little trick I noticed when I was working for a company that was filming me is they had a little sign that they put next to the kit that said who they were and what they were doing. So that might be a nice little way of getting around it.
That's a good point. It's something you have to do if you're shooting with drones, actually, is you sort of mark off an area and let everybody know that might enter the space. So it would make sense to do that if you're doing a sort of like a private shoot as well. That's good thinking. We've got a question from Harriet. It says, how do you go about finding a good location when your client has no or low shoot budget? I thought maybe Chris, you might like to answer that.
Yeah, I think for me, the first bit, particularly when you're working with a client, is understanding exactly what the client wants. And a lot of the time, and this is no disrespect to any clients, they don't know. And I think part of our job as photographers is to educate our clients and help them understand what they want to get from a shot, what they need it for, what they're using it for. Because in fact, in this field, we're the experts. They might be the expert in their given field, but when we're creating images for them, we to some extent know best. So first and foremost, I'm always about understanding exactly what they want. And I use tools like Pinterest and things like that to create a board together, so to make sure that we're exactly on the same page. And then it's a case of just thinking, right, first and foremost, do I know a good location, whether it's inside, outside, a studio, or, you know, as Gavin says, a rented location. And if I don't, I'll go out, you know, I'll physically go out and have a look. Again, for most jobs or most shoots that I tend to work with and my clients, they've got a good idea on how I work and the type of images I produce, so it becomes easier to help them understand what I'm going to do with that. But I think it's just communication's absolutely key in the first instance with clients.
Okay, right. Gavin, I think we've got a good question for you here, which is if you've got a shoot all planned, you've got your location sorted, you've got your model sorted, and then you turn up and it's bad weather. How do you handle that?
Oh yeah. I've been there. Yeah. So we did a wonderful shoot a couple of years ago. I had this shoot planned and we'd hired the location. We got the model in. I had a car full of kit, and it started raining as we arrived, and then it just continued to rain and rain and rain and rain, and it was awful. That was an extreme. We ended up cancelling the session, so I ended up paying for the model and the location and got nothing out of it. By and large, the way to get around that is to have a plan B. So it's the way I tend to work is I know what I want to shoot, but at the back of my head, I'm also thinking, I could also do this if it doesn't work. You know, I've got a wet weather plan. Certainly my gear, I've got, well, my camera's okay, that's weather sealed, but my flashes aren't. So I have large clear bin bags that I can stick over the top of my flashes, and I've done that many times. Workshops is a prime example where you can't rearrange your workshop. So yeah, I've done that many times where I've had to cover things up. The thing I like to do is to think of locations. If I'm looking for a location, think of what I would do if it does rain, because it does, it happens. It's pretty much 50% of the time the weather isn't what you hope for when you actually have to go out on a shoot. So is there an indoor location? Is there an undercover location? The key is to keep your subject happy. That's the most important thing. Keep them warm and dry and happy. You can be cold and miserable and having a really bad day, but if they're having a bad day, it's going to show in your photos. Have a plan B, keep them dry, do the best you can. And if it is the worst case scenario, then you just have to reshoot.
Would your plan B include things like asking your model or your client to bring some extra, you know, warm clothing or an umbrella or anything like that?
Yeah, we always tell our clients or our models what sort of thing we expect them to do. Sometimes we're supplying the outfits, sometimes they're supplying the outfits. But yeah, I mean, they've got to stay warm. A cold model is not going to be a happy model. So most of the models we work with are experienced. So they're understanding of the situation that they're in and will accommodate the request pretty well. I mean, most of them are really tough, actually. It's quite surprising. I'm the one who tends to bail first. I'm the one who goes like, oh, I'm too cold, it's too wet, it's too horrible. So models are pretty good. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. You just have to be sensible. Again, we're talking about mobile phones. You can get an app on your phone, and one of my favorite ones is the weather radar. So you can see where you are and where the rain's coming in. And sometimes you can see a little window in that weather and you can sort of plan around it. So yeah, that's kind of a useful thing to have.
Okay, so we've spoken quite a lot about location and how you choose it. Maybe you should think about now the sort of things that you need to take with you. Maybe talk about lens selection. So Jeremy, is that something you would like to take on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mean, lenses is a really interesting thing because you can do so many different things with portrait photography. And if you're a photographer, the kind of standard tools that you might go out with are things like a 24-70 or a 70-200 as the kind of regular kind of portrait and wedding photographer's toolkit, with a fast aperture so that you can blur the backgrounds out. So having something that's on the faster side, giving you sort of f2.8 is what people really like to have, just because that gives you the ability, like I say, to photograph someone but then have a lovely blurry background behind. But it depends how you want the shot to be. 85mm is a nice very popular kind of focal length, and then aperture comes into it as well. Some people like 1.4, but you tend to find that you've got really narrow depth of field, so going out to 1.8 or wider than that will give you more of the subject's head in focus within the shot that you've got. I kind of, when I've been out doing portraits, and I used to do weddings quite a bit, and just doing wedding photography, and I tended to use a super zoom, partly because I didn't have the budget at the time, because this is some years back, but also because it gave me a range of options. So I was going out then with one lens that if I was the only photographer in that kind of environment, you're trying to take shots of different people at the wedding, it gives you the flexibility to move a little bit within the situations you've got. So there are lots of different options that you can look at with portraits, but you just need to think about how you want the subject to be, whether you want to be blurring the background out, and again, it comes back to location as well, where that location is and how you want them to sit within it. There's no reason you can't use lovely wide angle lenses as well as a portrait lens if you want to give the subject perspective of what's going on behind them. So lots of different ways of approaching it.
Yeah. Mark, do you have any further thoughts on lens selection?
Yes, I think there's some good tips there from Jeremy. I think when you're looking at size and weight as well of kit, I try and take one lens with me and try and push myself to try and be creative with that. So for example, a 35 1.8, you know, I've just got it over here. It's very, very small, and I don't need to take a bag. If it's wet, I could probably just put the camera and the lens in my pocket, in my coat, if it's that kind of weather. But yeah, 35 is good. I agree. 85 as well. The 85 1.4 that we sell, the G Master, is going to give you that completely washed out background as well, with really sharp center, you know, really sharp in the center as well. So great for portraits. And it's interesting to listen to the photographers in this chat around the obviously the people in the background. So I was out, I think last weekend, testing the Sony A1 with a 135 lens, and of course there's other families walking around you've got to be careful with. So luckily that type of lens is just going to completely wash the background out, so I've got no worries with that. But that's a very good point to take that consideration. But yeah, size and weight, and if I do take more than one lens, it might be a 35, maybe something a bit wider like a 20 24. And if I'm shooting any video as well, then that's probably kind of the wide like what I'm using now is a 24mm lens to try and get, you know, a little bit of background in and a nice kind of central portrait with a washed out background. So telephotos, again, Sony make a wide range of telephoto lenses. I probably take the f4 70-200. Again, it's so lightweight that even if sometimes my kids will pick it up when I'm at, because I don't have models. My models are my kids. I've got so many photographs of my kids and my dog and my cat. In fact, they feature a lot in the reviews that we do since lockdown in March last year. But yeah, so they tend to pick up the camera. So I don't want them picking up. Well, I don't want to pick them up anything really. I want them to be, if they do pick up, it's something quite lightweight. So and something you can just again throw into a bag or a coat or sometimes under a buggy as well. So yeah, those of you that obviously still use models, great. But mine are my kids and my wife sometimes.
Obviously, when we use zoom lenses, you've got the flexibility, but you tend to you have a zoom lens, you tend to kind of pick it up and use one end or the other. You know what I mean? You tend to buy, if you buy a 70-200, invariably you're buying it for the 200mm end, aren't you? When you're shooting a portrait, do you tend to sort of just pick it up and think, right, I'll zoom to this point because it's the framing, or do you automatically go to 200 and shoot from there?
I think
Good question. Oh, sorry. Go on, Jerry.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think with the zoom lens, it's quite important sometimes to just think about the composition, think about how you want the shot to be, and put yourself in a position where you're looking at the subject and how you want it to be, and then set the lens appropriately, and then move your feet to put yourself in the position to take the shot that you're looking for. You've got to think about what the end result that you're looking for is in the first place, I think, and then set things up from there. It is very easy to go to one or other end of the scale, but just try and use it creatively, because with the zoom lens, you've got 4, 5, 6 different lenses all within one nice little package. So you've got a lot of flexibility, and it comes back to budget as well. If you've got a budget that isn't going to allow you to choose a lot of different lenses, you can have one lens that gives you lots of different solutions.
Did you want to add anything to that, Mark?
I think budget, absolutely spot on. I mean, I'm very fortunate. Obviously, I work for Sony. I've got kit to use, and you know, we don't just have kit lying around and stuff because it is expensive for, you know, to buy ourselves as well. But you know, it's the quality of lenses throughout the range is excellent. And I think, you know, if you can afford the higher, more premium lenses, then that is going to give you obviously the ultimate technology you can get with kit from Sony. So I know, working with a lot of photographers, filmmakers that we work with, you know, with consumer activities and things like that, tend to use, you know, quite a lot of the expensive glass. But there's a lot of photographers out there that we work with that are using, you know, like 50mm 1.8 portrait lens, 200-300 quid. You know, it clearly does the you know, a really good job as well. So you may not have the ultimate quality that's going to cost, I don't know, £2,000, but you know, the entry middle range is just as competitive as it is the higher end. So yeah, that's
I add something to that as well.
Sure.
Is that okay? Yeah, I was just thinking, for me as an outdoor photographer, I love having a lens that's quite telephoto. So I use the 85 because I find it's really versatile, because I don't want to get too close to my subjects. And outdoors, you have the ability to move back, so you don't have to worry about getting right in someone's face. I think that makes people more comfortable when you're shooting them. But the 85, it's wide enough that if you do go back, you can get a whole portrait of someone. And it's something that I find I'm able to get those wider portraits and the ones that are close up with just one lens, and then I don't have to carry out loads of different equipment, and you can get them very cheap, like the 1.8s. They don't cost too much, and I think that's, if you're going to get one lens, I think it's nice to get something that you feel like you can do quite a lot with, and then just really hone that skill using that lens. So that would be my advice.
Yeah,
for that one. That's the one I use.
Gavin, as a Micro Four Thirds user, what would you go for?
So I'm going to chip in with a slightly different end of things, actually, because yeah, long lenses are terrific. There's nothing wrong with a long lens. And in my studio, yeah, I mean, I do the same thing, blur the background out, all that. But on location, it's a different story. I mean, I've paid good money, or I've spent time and effort getting to a location. Why do I want to blur it out? That's nuts. I want to actually show the location. I want to have it in the frame. So I actually love using wider lenses. So yeah, Micro Four Thirds, the Olympus system, the 7-14mm, which would be the equivalent of a 14-28mm on a full frame. I love that lens for location portraits. It's really wide. I can take in all of the location that I've paid good money for and create a portrait that's environmental. It's actually showing where I am, that the context of the person in the landscape kind of makes a bit more sense. I even love using fisheye lenses, and that seems like crazy and counterintuitive for portraits. But some of my most dramatic shots, particularly if it's a portrait where you have a character, I do a lot of sort of character-based portraits. That can be something that really just stands out and makes your pictures look a little different to everybody else's. But yeah, don't forget the wide-angle lenses. They're really good for location shoots.
So what would you go for then?
What do I go for?
Yeah.
My go-to lens is always the 12 to 40 millimeter, which is 24 to 80 equivalent. But I'll always have my 7 to 14 millimeter in the bag. And although I've got a telephoto lens, and I always have it on me because it's not exactly heavy, I rarely ever use it on location, because if you're going for an extreme telephoto lens, your model ends up so far away that you lose that connection with them. So yeah, I tend to use the 7 to 14. And the annoying thing is, when you end up with a lens and you suddenly think, this is great, you end up just using it over and over and over again. That can be a bit of a problem. We spoke about sort of lead feet and not moving your feet in portraits. Not trying a lens that you don't normally use is another mistake photographers make. We have to pick up other lenses. Try a lens, go out deliberately with the lens that isn't your favorite and do a shoot like that and see what you come back with.
That's a really interesting tip. I guess, yeah, don't carry all the other stuff. Just take the lens that you never use and find out what you can do with that.
Absolutely.
Cool. Jeremy, I got the impression there was something you wanted to add there.
I was just thinking about the wide angle side of things. I think that's a really relevant comment as well, because again, a long time ago when I used to go out and do a bit of wedding photography, having a wide angle lens in your portfolio is exactly what you need, because it kind of gets you out of some of the problems that we were talking about earlier. If you've got inclement weather and you've got to squeeze yourselves into a space and do something a little bit different and a little bit creative, it can be useful for that. But also when you're in a church, you want a picture of all the magnificence of where you are, and you want to get all of that involved in the portrait that you're taking of the bride and groom, or the person in that fantastic room in a country house. However it is, I think it's really important to try and involve that sometimes. So sort of having anything that's wide, 1735 or whatever, doesn't necessarily have to be the fastest lens, because you want that all to be part of the picture that you're creating. I just think it makes great images. I had a thing years and years ago. We were doing some things with Bronica, and someone was saying to me about, we had a really wide angle fisheye lens, and someone was saying to me, oh yeah, but you'd never use that for portraits, would you? But actually, if you think about it in an environment, the kind of circular effect that it gives you will kind of go around and take your eye towards the people that could be in the center of it. So you can use all sorts of lenses in very creative and different ways.
Yeah. And if you're thinking about a wedding location, I suppose the bride and groom have paid a fortune to get that location. So they'd probably like a few shots of them in it, where you can actually see what they spent the money on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a really important thing. And again, it goes back to earlier on saying you have to do your research. You have to go and visit the locations and see what's around, see where the light's going to be, see how you can use that, and use some of the spaces that are there to its maximum benefit.
Okay.
I think a lot.
Sorry.
So I think a lot of the time when it comes to sort of choosing kit and choosing equipment is to work backwards. So it's to have the idea in your head of what you want the image to be, and then to work backwards to go, I've got this idea, this is how I want to do it, what kit do I need to make that happen? I think sometimes rocking up with a massive bag full of equipment can be a little bit counterintuitive, because like Gavin said, you might not use 2/3 of it. So you'll see the image is in your head and you think, right, I know I need X, Y, and Z. And so you can then build your kit around that. I think sometimes, I think we've all done it on location, and you've got two huge bags, one full of lights, one full of equipment. You end up just using one lens and one light and one stand. The rest of the kit's just sat there in the corner, and you just think that was a waste of time. So I think you just need to make sure that you've planned perfectly what you're going to do and how you're going to put it together. And then you can start building, individual kits from there. That's how I work. But, that's the advice I would give.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you mentioned lights, Joe, because we've got a few questions, people asking about using lights. Just as a quick straw poll, who tends to predominantly use natural light here? Just give me a wave.
More a natural light shooter.
Okay, so Alex, Mark and Jeremy more towards natural light.
Yeah,
a little bit of both. Okay. Now, Joe, something tells me you probably use lights.
Yeah, I've been known to plug a light in every now and again. I think having the ability to use lights is key, really. We touched earlier upon what happens if you have bad weather, or you go and wreck your location on a Monday morning at 10:30, but you're not using it until Friday afternoon at 6:30. So being able to pull that out of the bag and being able to sort of make that light look, you want to make it look like it's 8:30 in the morning, but it is 6:30 in the evening. You've got the capabilities of doing that. If you do get to, like you say, to a wedding venue, it's a beautiful venue with fantastic grounds, but it's absolutely teeming down with rain. Sadly, there's nothing you can do in that situation. You're not going to be able to go, I'll tell you what, we'll come back next week when the weather's better. We'll do it again, because you haven't got that option. So being able to pull a light out, being able to set that up, and to be able to, to make that look how you want it, and to be in complete control, I think is key really in anything you're doing. I mean, being able to blend that with ambient lighting and things. I'm not taking anything away from, from people that shoot natural light, but personally, I just like to be in a bit more control of the situation. Being able to, fill in that shadow, add a bit of color, something like that, I think is really, learning to do that is going to take any photographer to that next step really within their creative abilities.
And are you primarily using the light for exposure, or is it for like extra sparkle and interest, or maybe to fill in shadows?
It's both really. I mean, sometimes you can think to yourself, this would be great and I like using this background, but if I put my subject there, there's no way there's going to be enough light to bring them into it. So the background will look great, but then if I expose for the subject, the background's burnt out. There's going to be that compromise, but it's being able to sort of balance that out is key. So yeah, I mean, you can use the flash from anything from being in a studio, not that this is really what it's about, but you're completely in control. You can use it to overpower the sun, just to bring you, that shot back, or you can use it, like you say, just to add a little bit of color, a little bit of light, a little bit of something to the back of the head that you think that's great, but if it just had this, it would make it that much better. So being able to bring those in, even if anything from, I know it sounds daft if you're looking around the venue and you see they've got a nice lamp and you just grab hold of that and you stick that in the background. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a expensive flash equipment. It's just bringing that little bit of light in, makes all the difference.
Yeah. And we've got a question from Julian, who's wanting to take portraits with off-camera flash, and he's wondering if you've got any tips for the setup and maybe some product recommendations.
Well, that's quite a sort of open-ended sort of thing, really. I mean, off-camera flash is more and more popular now. I think you've got a lot of people using it on everything from, say, sort of weddings, corporate portraiture to sort of almost street photography in some respects. They may have an assistant running around with a little light. So sometimes you've got to make sure you've got enough power. I mean, most speed lights are around 75 to 100 watts, which can do a lot. But if you are looking to wanting to make it a little bit more powerful, then you could advise having something, like one of the Badger Unleashed that we've got here, so with the light on behind me, which is just really good 250 watts of power. You can just chuck in your bag and take anywhere. So it's making sure you've got enough for what you're trying to create. Like I said earlier, if you work backwards, this is the shot I want, this is the location, what do I need to make it happen? In terms of power, the easy way, you can always turn it down, but you can't always turn it up. If you've only got so much power, you may not have enough to create what you're gonna do. But what I would say is don't go nuts, don't go mad buying thousands and thousands of pounds worth of equipment if you're not comfortable using it. So start small and work your way up would be my best advice.
Okay, good tip.
Can I chip in there?
Sure.
Can I chip in? Yeah, Julian, I've got a really good tip. I'm not tied down to a lighting brand. I can give you an honest advice. Although, to be fair, this is one of Joe's lights in the background. This is a Badger beam in the background, so maybe I should be a little bit. But anyway, Julian, this is what you need to do. The flashes, they are all brilliant. Honestly, they are all fantastic. There aren't really any bad ones nowadays out there compared to when I started. You want to choose this bit. This is the bit you're actually going to look at for the majority of your day, the remote control. Choose your light based on what you can use, and you actually pick up these, try the transmitters, because the transmitters are the bits that you need to like. Honestly, I don't know where the buttons are on my flashes. I know they're there somewhere, but the remote control I can literally use with my eyes closed. Choose your remote control, that will steer you towards your flash.
And which is your choice of remote control then?
My choice of remote control is this one. If I put it there, it's going to blow out because my exposure is out. but the reason for that is it's got huge writing, and I'm getting old, and I need these. I was like, I'm getting, oh, what's that? So anything with really big writing is ideal for me, because when I'm in the middle of a field and I want to one more stop of power, okay, yeah, one with a big writing. So this is the Godox, the Pixar Pro, the Flashpoint, because I work with an American company as well. Yeah, those are perfect for those of us with less good sight.
Angela, if I
Okay.
can jump in there, sorry.
Of course.
I actually did a video for the photography show when it got cancelled last year, and one of the, the theme of this video was I was going through lockdown, and obviously, like everyone else, I couldn't get outside to shoot, so I wanted to create something to help people, shoot with minimal kit. And I did a series of videos that's on the YouTube channel for the photography show, showing what you can capture at home with a speed light. And sometimes it's just about getting creative with it. And I said this on a workshop I was teaching the other week. I learned off-camera flash with a £20 speed light I bought off Amazon, which doesn't even have a screen. It was literally a dial on the back. And I taught myself with that. And just to echo the point that Joe was saying, you don't have to go and invest hundreds of thousands of pounds into gear. Start with the most basic and learn what to do with that first. And then as you start to develop your technique and start, you feel that that doesn't do enough for you, then that's the time to really start and saying, right, I need something that can deliver me extra power, high speed sync, TTL, whatever function that you need to take beyond that.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because sometimes the most basic flash, they're the easiest to understand, because you turn it on or off and you put the power up or down, and and the other option is to move it closer or further away. So it's really simple to control. You're not trying to second guess the TTL or anything like that.
Yeah, and one of the things I always say to people, look, light is light. Much like Gavin said, a lot of these things do the same job. It's just about finding one that works in your language or works in the way that you understand. And, sometimes, just to answer the initial question, getting started with off-camera flash, sometimes people think it's this big, hard, difficult thing. You've just got to simplify it into a language in a way that you understand to put it out in the way that works for you. And I'm not I'm not a technical guy. I watch Gavin talk about light and the way he talks about in his YouTube videos and stuff, and some of it goes over my head, whereas I'm just I'll shoot it and see it, and that's the way I work. So I think try not to overcomplicate it for yourself, and try not to get too bound down with the jargon and all the different techniques that are out there.
Okay, we've got a question from Paul asking about what sort of softbox would you recommend? Or I guess we could open that up to modifiers generally for shooting portraits outdoors. Chris, do you use modifiers outdoors?
Yeah, I've got one on my video light here that I use more often than not. It's a 95cm Octobox. It's the one that folds down into an umbrella. And what I find is I use this for probably 95% of the work I do. It's really easy to get a beautiful soft light from it. I can get a grid so I can control it even more when I need to. And because it's so portable, it just makes it nice and easy for me to take around. So that is a softened modifier. That's what I use more than anything else. If I'm looking for a hard modifier, it tends to be the long reflector, the 45-degree long reflectors. And that's if I just need that extra punch of power and I'm working on a super bright day and I want to overpower the sun.
Okay. Joe, do you have any thoughts on modifiers?
Again, you've got to sort of think about what you want. If you are on location, you don't want a 6 foot wide octobox that takes you an hour and a half to put together, because that's where it's going to live. So it's finding the easiest thing for your needs. I mean, obviously, umbrellas and things like that are really, really good, because they're super simple, relatively cheap, and you can carry them everywhere. But the pop-up, the octoboxes are the good go-tos. You can use those for just about anything. The advantage to them is they're round, so they give you a much more natural light, which is exactly what you want on location. But again, it depends on what sort of thing you're after. If you want a hard, punchy light, you're going to need something like the super or the deep zoom, something like that, to really give you that hard light. But most of the time you're on location, you want to complement what the light is like around you. You're not going to completely overpower it, and just, if you're going to go to location and use nothing that's available to you, you might as well stay in the studio. There's no point in going out. So my advice would be to take what complements the area you're working in, and isn't going to, you don't have to spend an extra £1,500 on an assistant and a pack mule to carry all of your stuff to where you need to be, because that's just a waste of time for everyone. So simple pop-up octoboxes and umbrellas tend to be my go-to, purely because of how easy they are and how versatile they are as well.
What would you recommend for someone who's wanting to start out in outdoor portraits in terms of number of lights to go for and perhaps power?
All right. So I think Gavin wants that one. Go on, Gavin.
Go on then, Gavin.
No, I think it was me and Chris doing exactly the same thing, which was you want
Right.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one's enough. Start with one. Start with one and build from there. Don't get a second light until you've run out of things you can do with the first light, and then you know you need a second light. Great, take a second light if you're on a shoot and you need a backup light, but leave it in the bag until you need it. Don't complicate things any more than you need to. It's complicated enough out there. Use the sun as a second light. Go from there.
Do you ever use people to sort of hold your lights for you, or are you always, you know, strictly using stands or reflectors or anything like that?
Don't normally get anyone to hold the light because that often creates sort of randomness in the light, and I like to have continuous sort of, you know, I know where everything is, but I always go out. Sam, my assistant, my wife, my manager, my dog's body, bless her, she does absolutely all those sorts of things. Having somebody with you on a shoot is a really handy thing to have, because you want to focus on the photography, and guaranteed I've left something in the car, so poor old Sam has to go and get them. But yeah, I prefer light stands, but then of course you open the can of worms of supporting your light, sandbagging your light, and all those sorts of things. So even if you just have someone standing next to the light, that's kind of useful.
I think having a voice activated light stand, someone to move it from A to B is massively important. And much like Gavin says, you know, one of the big, I use assistants on every location shoot I do purely, and it's a really good point Gavin makes. You want to stay in the moment of the photograph. You want to keep communicating with your subject. You don't have to keep nipping away and moving lights and doing this and doing that. So I think it's really important that if you can have an assistant, even if it's a friend and you offer to buy them cake and coffee, you know, someone who you can take along with you will be a big help.
Chris, would you set up your lights and arrange that the model comes along or your client comes along when it's set up, or are they there watching you set it all up?
And look, this is purely just down to experience and how long I've been doing this. It might take me a minute to set up the lights, but at this time I'm talking to my subject and I'm asking how the day was. And everything I do, I tend to ask 3 questions when I'm working with someone particularly new, especially if it's a headshot client and not a model. And I'm asking them, you know, what they do, even if I know they're an accountant. I'm just trying to make conversation, you know, where they're from, if they're from local to me, wherever. And if it's the start of the week, I'm asking what they did at the weekend. If it's the end of the week, I'm asking what they're doing at the weekend. And all I'm looking to do is find something where we can create conversation. And that allows me to do whatever I need to do here with lights and with my camera while still maintaining that contact. And it helps to ease that person, especially if they don't like being in front of the camera. It just helps to get them that little bit more relaxed.
Do you ever use coloured gels at all to sort of inject some colour into the situation?
Yeah, I use a lot. It's you know, looking behind Gavin there, he's got one against the wall. Obviously, I'm working with Lee Filters, who've put me forward for this talk today, and I use their gels a lot. I've actually been using them in the studio this morning, shooting some trainers. But one of the big things that allows me, and I know Gavin does this a lot in his location shoots, is to change the look of an image quite dramatically. So I did a series, the first shoot I did with Lee Filters at the start of last year, and working quite a well-known location in Newcastle, not the Tyne Bridge, but another bridge, which is cream in colour. And I use an orange CTO gel to light my subject and turn my camera white balance to tungsten. So it turned the entire scene to a blue hue, again, much like what's behind Gavin there. And then my CTO gel in the front brought my subject's skin tones back, and it changed the look of this image dramatically. And it allows you to just create so many different types of feels to images. And, you know, even if it's just, you know, much like I've got a warm light coming in on the side of me here, you can use them for so many different functions just to create some drama.
That's quite an interesting point, because I guess if you were trying to light a bridge over the Tyne, that's quite a dramatic or intensive lighting procedure. But if you just light your subject and use white balance to change the colour, suddenly you're injecting quite a lot of interest. Gavin, would you always aim to make your subject look neutral and play around with the colours in the background, or do you ever make your subject look colourful?
Yep, both of those have their place. Depends what you're doing. If it's a corporate shoot, then yeah, you want them to look absolutely neutral and everything's fine. If it's a wedding, you want them to look absolutely neutral. My goodness me, get the dress white. If it's a creative shoot, if it's one of our Halloween workshops, which was I think the last one we managed to do before all of this craziness happened, no one was the right color. Everything was weird colors. There was blue, there was red, there was smoke, there was gels. It was amazing. It's great fun. Break the rules on Halloween, those sorts of shoots. They are great fun to do. Stick to the rules if that's the right thing to do.
Okay, so I guess one depends on whether you're having fun and the other is whether you're being led by a client.
Yeah, that's two ends of photography, isn't it? So there is the bit where you do for yourself, the enjoyment bit, and then there is the bit you do for other people that perhaps pays the bills. Both of them are equally valid. Both of them need the same skill set, but maybe with a little shift in how you approach it from a lighting point of view.
Okay, now we've got perhaps 5 minutes left, so I'm going to put you all on the spot and perhaps just ask if each of you could give your #1 tip for getting started shooting outdoor portraits outside. Alex, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I think you've always got to consider what the photos are for, who the photos are for. So I think Gavin was just sort of alluding to this at the beginning, but sorry, not at the beginning, when he was just talking there. So if you're taking a photo for someone who just wants a photo of them and they want that to look a certain way, you know, plan for that and make sure that you make them feel comfortable. So I like to use natural light, and I know that in that environment that they're going to be very comfortable because there's not lots of equipment getting in the way, and I can talk to them and get a really good photo. But you might be taking photos for a client of someone and you need that to look a certain way, or you might be taking photos for yourself and you want that to look a different way. So just have it clear in your mind what it is you're going to take a photo of, and then think about how you're going to execute that, so that, you know, do I have to worry about how this person's going to be feeling, or can I be a bit more bossy and can I be a bit more creative? So just have a good idea at the outset.
Get it all in your head.
Yeah, get it all in your head.
What about you, Jeremy? Do you have any parting tips?
Yeah, I think just think about from you know, I work for a lens manufacturer, so think about budget. Think about how much you want to spend on a lens, and then try and fit something within that. But then think about how the subject is going to be, what kind of photography you're going to do, what kind of portraits, and what flexibility that lens needs to give. So just think about what we were saying earlier about, does it need to be something a bit wider because you're working indoors a lot, or does it need to be something a little bit more telephoto, or do you want something that's going to give you that flexibility of a zoom?
Okay, thank you for that. And Mark, obviously your kids and your dog are your main subjects. Would you say that they're a good choice for getting started with photography? Maybe not yours specifically.
It's lucky I've just closed the shed earlier because they're trying to get in now, and the dog. Look, the whole point is have some fun and embrace it, isn't it? I think regardless of what kit you use, lens choice, etc., is I mean, know what you're going to go for, practice it, enjoy it, test it. You know, we can't go out far at all at the moment, still in lockdown, and that may obviously ease as we go through the next few months. So there's a lot of things around you in the house, outside the house, to practice before. If you are going to go out and do if I'm going to go out and do some portrait shots, then I'm pretty much set up before I go out. So and then, you know, even if it's tough and the light's bad, or you keep challenging yourself to get the better picture, I think keep enjoying it and keep positive when you're doing it.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important part, actually, because why are you doing it if you're not enjoying it?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Chris, what would your final thoughts be?
I think certainly for outdoor flash, I think take your time and walk around the setup. Now, I post on my Instagram every day with behind the scenes setups and finished images just to try and give people ideas with this sort of stuff. And I think a lot of the time people will set up one lighting setup and think there's only one location to shoot this from, only one position to shoot this from. Walk around it where you can and shoot it from different angles. And even if you make a mistake, you'll actually learn lots from that mistake, thinking, well, I'll not do that again. But you can, you know, from one single lighting setup, for instance, like a 45-degree setup I've got here, you could shoot this from 180 degrees and get 6 or 7 different shots all from one setup. So I think understanding that one setup doesn't deliver one image, and as long as your distance to subject doesn't change, your camera settings don't have to change, and you can get a perfect exposure from every one of those spots. So I think just slow down and try to get as much from one setup as you can.
When you say distance to subject, you mean between the light and the subject?
The light and the subject, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, Joe, have you got any final parting words of wisdom?
I think any time you're photographing in a public place, you got to be prepared to make a fool of yourself. You know, you've got to be the guy putting on the wellies and standing in the lake. You've got to be that person lying on the floor, getting the angle you want. Yes, people are going to look at you. They're going to think, what's this clown doing? But you can't take it seriously. Like Mark said, you've got to make sure you're enjoying yourself. If you're not enjoying yourself, you've got to change something you're doing. Don't be scared, you know, especially when it comes to flash. Like Chris said, you've got to keep it simple. A lot of people have a theory that if they start using flash photography, all of a sudden something's going to explode and they're going to burst into flames and it's the end of the world. It really isn't. So, but yeah, so just make sure that you're not going to get too embarrassed. You know, you are going to get embarrassed. You're going to be in that situation when you're squashed into a corner trying to get the angle you want. You're lying on the floor. You've got mud on the back of your shirt because you had to lie down in the grass. It happens. Don't take it too seriously, and don't let it stop what you're doing.
Fantastic. Gavin, so have you got any final words of advice?
Yeah, everyone's just stolen all mine, haven't they? So that's brilliant. Thanks for leaving me to last. Really appreciate that.
That's all right.
Yeah, no, I think everybody's really covered it well. Definitely have fun, definitely make mistakes. But I'll finish really with something I always do to give myself a little bit of a personal confidence boost before I go on a location shoot. And that's just to check that my camera has a battery and a memory card. And if anybody in this group shakes their heads and says, oh, that's never happened to me, they're lying. Every photographer has to do this. We all have to check before we go, because I've done it. I've walked out on a shoot, opened up my camera, got it out, no memory card. Where am I going to find another memory card? So don't fall into that trap. Make sure that they're packed, that your camera is in the bag before you drive off, because that's just going to give you that extra little boost of confidence before you get to the location.
Maybe write yourself a checklist before you set off, so you know you can tick, 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 everything's packed. All
yeah,
sorted.
that's a good idea. Yeah, you can't do too much pre-planning.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's been really fantastic hearing all your advice, and I've really enjoyed speaking with you.